What is up, YouTube? In today's episode on the CR125 build series, we're going to get everything ready for the final reveal video. So as you can see, the bike still has a lot of stuff we need to do on it, and I'm going to try and go over everything I can in as much detail possible for you guys. I also just want to take a moment to thank everyone who has been watching this build series since the beginning, seeing all the work that's been put into this bike, and for supporting the channel. It's honestly pretty crazy. We're on the second to last video in this build series since we put so much work into it, but I can't wait to show you guys how amazing the bike's going to look. If you guys want to make sure you don't miss the final reveal video, go down below, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when I post it. Alright, now I'm going to install the brake line clamps for the rear brake. These are off the 2017 CRF 250 since I'm using that updated swing arm. And there's a clamp here that goes in the middle. I just think this is unnecessary. I don't think it needs 3 clamps here on the brake line. If I find out that it's kind of moving around while riding, I can always add this one in. But for now, I'm just going to put the screws in where the clamp would go here and just run it without it. If you guys remember from the last video, the chain was a little bit too thick and it was slightly rubbing up against the crankcase, so I ordered up a new chain and I'm hoping this one will fit on there. And it definitely seems to be moving a lot smoother here, no rubbing up against the crankcase on this one, so I think we're good to go. And now that we're back at the sprocket here, it looks like we're just a couple links too long, so I'm going to start and remove this link right here. So I'm trying to stay towards the front of this adjuster since this bike's swing arm's just a little bit longer than the OEM, but I can always adjust it out if the chain has too much slack. Alright, now I'm going to take the Tusk chain breaker here and go ahead and tighten it down on the link I want to remove from the chain. Now that I got the adjuster on there pretty tight, I'm going to take our actual chain link driver and go ahead and drive it through. It should feel pretty easy. You can see we got the pin all the way removed here, so now we're just going to remove the chain. And we can install our new links. You can see there is O-rings here, so this is a X-ring chain as Primary Drive likes to call it. This is an example of a chain that's not an X-ring. You can see there's no O-rings or anything sitting on there. So this one does have O-rings, and the whole goal of the O-rings is just going to sit in between the links where they connect, and it's just to prevent dirt from getting in. So it's going to make your chain last a little bit longer, but it may add a little bit of extra weight, so it's really a trade-off for you. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and install these O-rings. This is a pretty easy process. You're just going to install them both on here and then press it into the 2 holes on the chain. And then we'll put on our outer chain O-rings as well, and you can see they did give us some lube to make sure all 4 of these are really lubed up to prolong the life of your chain. And after you get them all lubed up, you can reinstall them, and we'll go ahead and install our plate here. And now we can go ahead and measure our chain slack. I have the bike sitting down so the suspension's compressed, and I'm going to measure from the top of the chain slider here. And you can see we're getting around 54 millimeters, so that's a little bit over spec. Spec's around 35 is what Honda recommends, so I'm going to go out about 4 or 5 turns on each side and see if that gets us to where we need to be. You want to make sure to evenly extend your wheel on both sides. And it looks like we were just a little bit too long, so I'm going to add just a little bit on both sides, and that should just put us right where we need to be with the rear axle. And now that we're where we need to be, I'll just lock down our rear axle with this adjuster nut there. And everything looks like it's moving smoothly here, so the drivetrain on this bike is all ready to go. Alright guys, so now I'm just going to torque down everything that still needs to be torqued down on this bike. I went ahead and put the torque specs on here for you. I know a lot of you guys have messaged me saying you're doing a similar build, so I wanted to include these for you guys. If you guys have a different model or something, you want to check your service manual, though these will probably be pretty similar to your bike. And this steering nut here, I already torqued down, it's 80 foot-pounds. I already did this one at the bottom of the shock, it's 33 foot-pounds. The little click you get when you're torquing stuff down has to be one of my favorite sounds out there, especially for 94 foot-pounds. So in the last video I asked you guys whether I should go with black, blue, or red radiator hoses on this bike, and a ton of you guys voted, so I'm super happy about that. I always appreciate your input. It happened to be that it was pretty even. There was no particular trend across the voting, so didn't really do a ton for deciding because you guys didn't have like, oh yeah, it's definitely going to be this across everybody, but I think definitely black, after seeing the graphics, is going to be the best one. I know you guys haven't seen the graphics yet, so I hope that's not too big of a hint, but I think black's our color on this bike. And the little thing I'll do here, you can see that clamp sticking out, is I'll just press it in with a pair of pliers. It's not going to go in perfectly, but it's just going to press it up against there and give it a little bit cleaner of a look. Then I also picked up some black bleeder hose to fit in with our black radiator hoses. So I'm just going to be using some Maxima Coolant. This works in the winter and summertime, and this bike calls for 32 ounces. And as I go, I like to lean the bike just to make sure the coolant gets into both the radiators and the air evacuates the system. If you're still worried about having a little bit of air in your system when you first start up the bike, for like the first 20 seconds or so, you can leave the cap off until that coolant starts to get hot, then it'll come out, but that'll make sure all your air is out of the system. And now I'm going to go ahead and install the exhaust system, but I'm going to remove this old seal first and just make sure it's all clean here so I can put a new seal on there. And I also like to put some high temp silicone on here. This will prolong the life of that seal because it will reduce the vibrations and it'll also help prevent leakage. It's also a good idea to make sure you're replacing your springs because this will help your exhaust stay on there tight. And that silicone also works great on the silencer as well. So this is the setup I'm going to be using on the trails with this bike because of the spark arrestor in the silencer. And also I'm going to be using this fatty pipe on the trails. But I do have a race setup that I have not showed you guys yet, and I'm super excited to show you guys that later on. Alright, now I'm going to show you guys how to bleed brakes on a completely dry system. I'm not going to show you guys the rear just because it's a lot easier to bleed than the front on a dry system, but you're going to want to start with your brake reservoir level so fluid doesn't pour out. And then I'll fill the reservoir here up all the way with .4 brake fluid, and then we can head down to the caliper. Alright, so how I bleed a dry system is using a bleeder like this. Yes, you can do it by hand. It just takes like 4 times as long. With this, I can get all the fluid through the system and ready to go by hand very quickly. So I picked this up on eBay a while back. The only drawback to it is you do need an air compressor. You only need 20 to 40 psi. I think they do have ones you can operate by hand, but I haven't used those before. But before I hook it up, I do like to cover the caliper up, especially when it's coated or you have coated rims, with a rag here just under the nipple in case there's any leakage. Sometimes this fitting does go on there pretty good usually, but sometimes there is a slight amount of leakage that comes out of it. And then all I'm going to do is crack this bleeder valve open with a 8mm wrench, just a couple turns to make sure it's all the way open here. If you get it kind of cracked open, it won't draw through as well. And now that we have a secure connection down at the caliper, we can come back up to our reservoir here, and you can see there's already a little bit of air escaping from the system. This is just because it's open and it's starting to slowly draw it through, but it's not going to be enough to draw the fluid through. So all I'm going to have to do from up here is just press the lever, and they give us a nice long hose so I can do it up by the caliper. And I'm just going to press this lever and watch the level as it draws down. And as our reservoir gets low, I'm going to add some more brake fluid, because if this were to ever empty out, we'd just be sucking air into the system and would have to start all over. And the trick with this is to just do this until you get a consistent flow of brake fluid into your brake bleeding tool. So if you guys are interested in picking up one of these brake bleeding tools, they do work super well, and they were only about $15 on eBay, so I'll have a link to where you guys could pick one up. I have no affiliation with this company, it's just genuinely a good tool. And now you can see we got a good amount of fluid coming through into the tool, so I'm just going to do a little bit more here on the reservoir, and that'll be enough to where we can bleed it by hand. Alright guys, now that we got enough fluid bled with our bleeding tool, I'm just going to close off this valve here so no fluid leaks out, and then go ahead and remove the tool. Alright, now I'm ready to show you guys how to finish it off by bleeding with hands. So you'll just need a bucket to get the fluid in, and then a nice clear hose I like to have so I can watch the fluid and air coming out. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and start bleeding it. So when I go ahead and press the lever, I'm just going to open this valve, and then when I release the lever, I'm going to close it off. And this will just draw all the air out of the system. And I may have to repeat this process 10 to 15 times, but it's going to go much quicker than trying to do this as a dry system. Okay, and then I have one hand up on the lever right now, and I have one hand down here on the bleeder valve. So I'm going to open it up. Squeeze the lever and you can see some fluid comes out. Close it off. Release the lever. Open it back up. Squeeze the lever again. Close it off. Release the lever. Open it up. Squeeze the lever. Sometimes it's nice to hold it down a little bit. You get a little bit of extra air. Close it off. Release the lever. And a lot of you guys are probably wondering how you know when you're done. Well, I kind of use a gauge as to when I'm done. When I don't see any air coming out of the system anymore, then I know I'm pretty much done, and I'll take it on a ride test and make sure the brakes feel good. Another good thing to make sure to do is close off your valve and check to make sure there's pressure when you're done. That's a good sign that you're headed in the right direction too. And this rubber piece comes from the factory zip tied. I'm just going to switch it out from the black zip tie to a red one to fit in with the color combo better. So as I was tearing down the bike, I realized that the piece where the tie strap connects to was broken off of there before I had the bike. And I totally forgot about it throughout this build, but now as I'm obviously installing the gas tank, I realized that I was off of there, and it was a piece kind of like this. This is just off another bike, but it just connects onto there with the strap. So I'll have to weld a new one of these on here in the next video. So since I'm getting ready to run this bike soon, I'll need to get the fuel all ready before I put it in. So right now I have 95 octane ethanol free fuel, and I'll need to bump up that octane to work with my H13 fathead that I have on the bike right now, because that ups the compression, so we will need a higher octane fuel. So I'm going to go from the 95 with this octane additive up to 103, so that'll push me past the 100 that Fathead Racing recommends. And the mix ratio for this octane additive is going to be 1 quart per 5 gallons of gas. I'm going to mix in some Super M Maxima 2-stroke oil here, and I'm going to do this at a 1 to 32 mix ratio, which is what Honda recommends, so I want to stay at that while I'm breaking the bike in. And then for grips, I just have some red half waffle ODI grips here. And to install them, I'm going to be trying out this Pro Taper grip glue. And this clutch side grip is sliding on there pretty good. Just looks like there's a lot of extra glue on there. And this throttle side one did not go very well at all. I got it on there pretty much all the way, and then it just kind of set in place and cured onto the grip, so I couldn't get it to go any farther, and I ended up ripping the grip a little bit trying to get it on there all the way, as you can see there. So I'm not going to want to run this on the bike. I'm probably just going to get some lock-on grips. I hadn't used this grip glue before. I've always been one to just wire tie down my grips, but now a lot of you guys said when I posted this on my Instagram story, maybe I should just get some lock-on grips, so I kind of want to try some of those out. Also, this stuff does leave a lot of residue on here, so I just wouldn't recommend it.